The lake was silent when Carter dragged the unconscious CEO out of the sinking jet. But by sunrise, everything changed. 3 black vehicles rolled up to his small cabin doors, opening in slow, deliberate silence. Faces he didn't recognize stepped out, watching him like he was already guilty of something. Carter didn't know it yet, but saving a life was about to put his life on trial. And the truth behind those engines tearing down the dirt road would expose a reality far bigger than him. Before we begin, comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Before the incident that would turn his quiet world upside down, Carter lived a life most people would never notice. Tucked deep in the outskirts of Ridgewood Valley, his days moved with the same rhythm: early mornings fixing old engines for cash, afternoons helping his daughter, Amara, with schoolwork, and evenings spent by the lake where silence felt safer than any street he'd ever lived on. For a black single father raising a young girl alone, peace wasn't just comfort, it was survival. The cabin he called home wasn't much: creaking wooden floors, a patched-up roof, and handmade shelves filled with tools he'd collected over the years. But for Carter, it was enough. Out here, no supervisors watched him with suspicion. No neighbors clutched their bags tighter when he passed, and no one judged him for simply existing. Ridgewood Valley gave him space to breathe, even if the world outside its borders never truly stopped reminding him who he was. Amara's laughter echoed across the water on most evenings, the kind of sound that briefly made Carter forget how hard life had been since her mother passed. He guarded that peace fiercely. Out here, he could teach her how to fish, how to read the sky, how to find stillness in a world determined to shake people like them. But peace has a way of making danger feel distant, and danger in Carter's life rarely came with warnings, because just beyond the tree line, on that calm spring afternoon, something was already going wrong in the sky, something that would pull Carter into a storm far bigger than a rescue. A storm shaped by power, perception, and the unspoken rules that had always followed him. He had no idea how quickly his quiet life was about to unravel the moment Carter pulled the soaked, unconscious CEO from the sinking jet. Something he couldn't name tightened in his chest. He had done what any human being would do, what any father would hope someone might do for his own child. But even as he dragged the woman onto the muddy shore, he felt the familiar weight of eyes that weren't there. The kind of eyes people like him could sense long before they ever appeared by sunrise. Those eyes had arrived. 3 black vehicles rolled through the valley with the kind of authority that didn't need permission from anyone. Engines low, tinted windows hiding every face inside. Carter stood on his porch, Amara inside finishing breakfast, unaware of the quiet storm forming outside their walls. When the doors opened, the air shifted. Men in polished shoes stepped out, scanning the property like they were assessing a threat. Their gaze passed over Carter with that silent calculation he'd seen too many times, the kind that measured skin before character. They didn't ask how he was. They didn't thank him. They only looked at him like he was standing somewhere he didn't belong. Even after the woman he saved stepped out, still bruised, still shaken, the coldness didn't fade. Her presence didn't soften the eyes around her. If anything, they sharpened, as if questioning how a man like Carter had been present at the exact moment her jet went down. In the hours that followed, the valley turned restless. Phones began ringing in nearby homes. Strangers appeared near the trail entrances, pretending to admire the lake but watching Carter's cabin too closely. Cameras peeked from vehicles parked just out of sight. Whispers followed him everywhere he went, quiet at first, then louder. Words like coincidence, setup, suspect. The kind of language that didn't need evidence to stain a black man's life. When Carter tried going into town for groceries, conversation stopped the moment he stepped inside. People who'd waved at him for years suddenly found reasons to be on the opposite aisle. A clerk who'd chatted with him every week stared at him like he was one wrong move away from trouble. He reached for a carton of milk, and a woman pulled her child closer as if danger had stepped between them. Carter kept walking, shoulders heavy, jaw tight, refusing to let the anger boiling under his ribs spill into the open, because he knew how quickly anger could be rebranded as violence. Back at home, things only grew worse. The story spread online, clips of the crash, blurred images of a figure swimming through the lake. Headlines twisted his bravery into suspicion. Some posts outright accused him of orchestrating the crash. Others said he was seeking attention, money, or something darker. People he'd never met spoke about him like they'd known him for decades, and when the first reporter approached his driveway, camera rolling, voice sharp with accusations, Carter felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not for himself, for Amara, because he knew exactly how dangerous a lie could become when it was pointed at a black man in a quiet town, and he could feel that danger closing in from every direction. But the worst part wasn't the lies, or the stares, or the twisting of truth. It was the silence from the one person who could stop it. The woman he had saved. She hadn't returned. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't defended him. Not yet. And Carter couldn't shake the feeling that when she finally did, it would either clear his name or destroy everything he had left. The breaking point came the night Carter heard tires grinding against gravel outside his cabin, slow, deliberate, like whoever had arrived wanted him to hear it. Amara was already asleep, her small frame curled under a blanket, unaware of the danger gathering outside her window. Carter stepped onto the porch, chest tight, every instinct alert. What he saw made his stomach drop. 2 news vans, 3 sheriff vehicles, and a crowd of strangers armed with phones, whispers, and assumptions. Their cameras weren't there to capture the truth. They had come to capture a story they'd already decided was real. A deputy stepped forward first, hand hovering near his belt, eyes fixed on Carter with that familiar mix of suspicion and entitlement. Not a word had been spoken, yet the message was clear. They weren't here to thank him. They were here to corner him. Carter raised his hands not because he was guilty, but because he'd lived long enough to know what happened when a black man stood his ground in front of a crowd that had already judged him. His breath steadied, but fear clawed at his spine. Not for himself. For the little girl asleep behind the thin cabin walls. Flashes erupted from phones. Voices layered on top of each other, twisting questions into accusations. Someone shouted that the crash wasn't an accident. Another claimed Carter had been seen near restricted areas. Lies multiplied faster than truth could breathe. And then through the chaos, headlights swept across the crowd. A single vehicle cut through the commotion and rolled to a stop. The woman he had saved stepped out, her blue dress whipping in the wind, her face pale but determined. The crowd shifted. Cameras turned. Even the deputy froze. She walked past the officers, past the reporters, past the raised phones, and stopped directly in front of Carter. For a moment, the valley held its breath. What she said or didn't say would decide whether Carter walked back inside to his daughter, or whether this night would become another headline carved into America's painful history. When the woman finally spoke, her voice carried more weight than the flashing cameras or the badges standing between Carter and the crowd. She told the truth, how he had saved her life, how he had acted without hesitation, how none of the accusations against him held even a thread of reality. And as her words cut through the noise, something in the crowd shifted. The same people who had come searching for a villain were suddenly forced to confront the truth, standing quietly on the porch. A father, not a threat. A man, not a headline. The deputies backed away first, unsure now of the narrative they had walked in believing. The reporters lowered their cameras, their expressions cracking as guilt slipped through the seams. Lies that had fueled a storm began dissolving under the weight of clarity. And when the crowd finally dispersed, the silence that followed felt heavier than the chaos that came before. Inside the cabin, Carter watched Amara sleeping peacefully, unaware of how close the world had come to tearing their lives apart. He knew this moment would stay with him, not because of the danger, but because of how easily the truth could have been buried under fear, assumptions, and prejudice. He had lived his whole life navigating a world that judged him before it ever met him. Tonight was just another reminder, yet this time something changed. Someone with power chose truth over convenience, and her voice paired with his courage pushed back against a cycle that had swallowed too many men who looked like him. The next morning, the valley felt different. Not safer, not healed, but awake. And as Carter stood at the lake's edge, watching the water ripple beneath the rising sun, one question lingered like a quiet echo. How many more lives must face this storm before the world learns to see black men as human, before it chooses justice over fear?